My ex left me to find love, then told her new husband I should pay for his kids too, but I finally set the line they can't cross. 8 years ago, my ex, Adabo, and I broke up right after our twins were born. We hadn't even been together that long, just about 14 months, when she found out she was pregnant. We both kind of panicked and thought, well, maybe we should try and make this work for the kids. You know how it goes. You think maybe a relationship will just fall into place because of the family side of it. I'll admit we weren't exactly compatible from the start. We had some good times, sure, but it wasn't this deep, long-lasting connection. But when she got pregnant, I thought, maybe we could push through and make it work. We were about as compatible as chalk and cheese, though. But for the twins, we gave it our best shot. For a while, things were okay. I mean, we had some arguments, as people do, but nothing huge. We co-parented well enough, and we weren't at each other's throats. Then she met someone new, someone she thought she could have a future with. I get it, she wanted a fresh start, something different than what we had, so she was upfront about it, and we both agreed that splitting up was for the best. I can't say I was heartbroken because, honestly, the relationship wasn't exactly solid. But we ended things pretty amicably for a breakup anyway. We settled into a rhythm with co-parenting after that. Things were smooth, or as smooth as they can be with two people trying to raise kids from separate homes. We split time pretty evenly, kept communication focused on the kids, and actually co-parented pretty decently. We both wanted to make sure the twins weren't affected by any tension, so we made a real effort. The kids got time with both of us, and we didn't have any child support since we split everything evenly. Then, about 2 years after we split, Adabo met her now husband. This guy wasn't the one she started dating right after we broke up though. He was someone new. And here's the thing. He had a daughter who was the same age as our twins. She told me about him and how they were getting serious. And yeah, I wanted to support that to make things easier for the kids. I was fine with the idea of them having another father figure around. But things started shifting when she brought up including her stepdaughter, in the same way we included our twins in everything. She kinda threw it out there casually, like, oh, it'd be nice if we all did things as one big family. At first it seemed harmless enough. I thought she was just trying to blend families, you know? But it got a little strange when she started suggesting I treat her stepdaughter like she was my own. Now let me be clear, I got nothing against her stepdaughter. She's just a kid in the middle of all this. But Adabo seemed to think that just because we were all connected through the twins, I was somehow obligated to make her stepdaughter part of every activity, every outing I had with my kids. When we first talked about it, I told her that while I understood she wanted everyone to be included, it wasn't my responsibility to act as a dad to her new husband's kid. I already had my hands full being a good dad to my twins. But she kept pushing the idea. I tried not to get frustrated. It's tricky stuff, co-parenting. You're trying to balance your family's needs while keeping the peace with an ex and their new partner. But the expectations just kept piling up. Things took a turn when she started expecting me to babysit her stepdaughter whenever I had my twins. Like, if I was taking my kids out for a weekend activity, she would call up and ask if I'd also take her stepdaughter along. I didn't mind occasionally, but it became this expectation. And don't get me wrong, I don't have an issue helping out here and there, but I didn't sign up to be a third parent to her husband's kid. And honestly, I didn't see how that was fair to me, or even to my own kids. After some time I realized that every time I planned something special for my twins, it would somehow turn into a thing about the other kids in her household. It was like I wasn't allowed to have time just with my own kids anymore. And when I bought gifts or planned a little surprise outing, I'd hear about how it wasn't fair if her stepdaughter wasn't included in the same way. She even got upset once because I didn't spend as much on a gift for her stepdaughter as I did for our twins. I had to draw the line somewhere. So, I decided I'd keep my time and my resources focused on my twins. I explained this to her, and predictably, it didn't go over well. She said I was being selfish and that I wasn't supporting her whole family. She wanted this big blended family, but that wasn't something I had signed up for. I told her that while I wanted my twins to feel like they belonged, it didn't mean I had to support kids who weren't mine in the same way. She wasn't happy about it, but we kept things civil enough to continue co-parenting. Since that conversation, we've been more parallel parenting than co-parenting, if that makes sense. We stick to our own time with the kids and rarely do anything together as a big family. We don't share our plans or mix the kids from her house with mine. It keeps things simple, and for me, it lets me focus on my own kids without all these extra expectations. But still, every now and then, she'll bring it up, like I'm supposed to feel guilty for not jumping in to help raise all the kids under her roof. Over the years, the situation with her family has only gotten more complicated. She and her husband had a baby together, and later on, they took in her husband's nephew. So now, at her place, there's my twins, their stepsister, a step-cousin, and a half-sister. Adabo tries to keep everyone as one big happy family, but I've made it clear that my role is with my kids, and that's it. So, yeah, it's complicated. Every time I think we've hit a point where things are settled, there's something new. But I've stuck to my boundaries. And I don't think it's unreasonable to focus on the 2 kids who are actually mine. I mean, it's one thing to support her decisions as a mother, but it's another to be expected to be a parent to everyone under her roof. Alright, so fast forward a bit, and here's where things really started to go off the rails. Over the years, with the added members of Adabo's household, it's been harder and harder to keep boundaries steady. You know, at first we'd kind of figured out a balance where I was doing my part as a dad without being wrapped up in her new family situation. But her expectations kept growing, and it felt like every few months, there was something new she expected me to help with. Her stepdaughter, her husband's nephew, their baby together. It's like they kept adding layers, and somehow, I was supposed to shoulder some of that load. Then came this whole school trip thing. So, the school my kids go to is a bit on the smaller side, which means they're in a mixed-age class. This also means they're in the same classroom as their stepsister and step-cousin, which, fair enough, I get it. It's a little unusual, but it works for the school, and it doesn't bother me. What I didn't expect, though, was how it would turn into a whole thing with their mom and stepdad about what I was supposed to pay for. This trip is a big deal for the kids. It's not just a small field trip, it's a visit to this interactive museum that's supposed to be amazing. The school plans on having the kids learn all this cool stuff hands-on, and they've got workshops set up. It's pricey though, no doubt about it. But my twins were super excited, and it just seemed like one of those things that would be a good memory for them. I can cover the cost, so I figured, why not? I went ahead and paid for them, so I tell Adabo about it, thinking she'd just be glad the twins were getting this experience, right? Wrong. The minute I mentioned paying for it, she got weirdly quiet, then flat out said that if the other kids couldn't go too, it wasn't fair. At first, I thought she was joking. Like, there's no way she actually expected me to pay for the other 2 as well. But nope, she was dead serious. She starts saying that it's not right for our kids to go on this luxury trip if her other kids can't go too. I tried to keep it calm. I told her I'm paying for my twins to go because they're my responsibility. I even suggested maybe she and her husband could try fundraising or saving up for the other kids if it meant that much. But then she hits me with, you need to think about how they're all going to feel watching your kids go on this trip and being left behind. Apparently, the whole household will fall apart if these kids don't all get the exact same experiences. And here's where it started to get pretty heated. Her husband jumps in, saying how it's unfair to treat the kids differently. Now, I'm all for fairness, but there's a line here. His stepsister and nephew aren't my responsibility, and I'm not made of money. I asked him straight up, why is it my job to pay for all the kids in your house? And he just gives me this look like I'm the one being selfish. He even goes on this rant about how they're all supposed to be siblings, and how I'm sabotaging their family. Now, look, I get it. No kid wants to be left out, but at some point, they have to understand that I'm not their dad. Adabo has decided to bring in these other kids, and she has a whole new family set up. That's her choice, and I'm not about to be guilt-tripped into paying for every single kid she takes under her roof. The thing that really set me off, though, was when they both started making it sound like I was being cruel. They talked about how this would damage the kids' relationships, and that it would be my fault if our twins and their stepsister grew apart over something like this. I mean, come on, I'm just a dad trying to do something nice for my own kids, and somehow, it's turned into this family drama about what I'm not doing for kids that aren't even mine. So, I said, look, I don't think it's fair to expect me to cover everyone's expenses. This trip is a treat for our twins. It's during my time with them, and I want them to go. I don't see how that's being unfair to anyone, but Adabo just kept going, saying that if our twins go and the other kids don't, they'll feel like they're being treated as less than, and that I should care about that. Her husband even tried to bring up family unity, and said that if the kids end up resenting each other, it'll be on me. At that point, I'm honestly just over it. This isn't about family unity, it's about them trying to make their financial choices my problem. And it's not like they're struggling to get by either. They have decent jobs, and if this trip meant that much, they could find a way to make it work without relying on me. I mean, it's not my job to stretch my finances to make up for what they can't or won't do. The whole argument just kept going in circles. They kept bringing up how this is unfair, and that I should think about the family. But I stood my ground. I told them it wasn't my fault they couldn't send the other kids, and that I wasn't going to let them guilt-trip me into paying for it. That's where we left it. But I could tell from the look on her face that this was far from over. Honestly, I walked away from that conversation feeling both irritated and confused. It was like no matter how much I tried to explain that I wasn't responsible for all her family's kids, they just weren't hearing it. Somehow, my focus on my own kids had become an issue, and I'm being made out to be the villain in their family story. It's honestly exhausting. I just wanted to do something nice for my twins, and now it's become this giant issue about fairness and unity. I feel like I'm walking a tightrope where every little decision could spark another argument. All I wanted was to give my kids a fun experience, but apparently, that's too much to ask. Alright, so after the whole argument over the school trip, I figured that would be the end of it. At least for now. I thought I'd made it clear I wasn't paying for all the kids, and I'd hoped Adabo and her husband would just drop it. But nope, it turned out they weren't about to let this go without another round. I didn't expect what came next though, because honestly, this one blew me out of the water. So, a few days after the trip argument, I get a message from Adabo telling me she wants to meet up to talk. I knew this wasn't going to be a friendly coffee date, but I figured it's better to get it over with than to keep going back and forth through text. I agreed, and we set a time to meet at this small diner that's kind of halfway between our places. She shows up, and right off the bat, I can tell this isn't going to be a quick chat. She's got that serious look on her face. The one where you know they've rehearsed what they're going to say. So, she sits down and right away starts with, "I don't think you're understanding the situation," and I'm thinking, I think I understand it just fine. I'm paying for my kids, and that's that. But I let her talk. She goes into this whole thing about how I need to look at the bigger picture, and how this isn't just about a school trip. It's about setting a standard for how we're going to handle things going forward. I guess she thinks that if she frames it as this big family philosophy thing, I'll feel obligated to agree. She starts saying how this trip is just one example, and in the future, there will be other activities, events, maybe even family vacations, and that we should be on the same page about treating all the kids equally. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wait, is she seriously suggesting I pay for family vacations for all her kids now? But I just listened, trying not to react too much because I knew if I got too heated, it would only make things worse. Then she brings up the whole fairness argument again. She says, if your kids get to do these things and the others don't, it's going to cause resentment. They're going to feel left out. She even goes as far as to say it could damage the kids' relationship with each other, that they'll grow up with this inequality that'll tear them apart. And I'm just sitting there thinking, they're already different kids from different families with different lives. Why is this suddenly my problem to solve? When she finishes, I try to keep my voice calm and tell her, I get that you want all the kids to feel equal, but these aren't my kids. They're not my responsibility. I remind her that we've been doing this whole parallel parenting thing for a while now, where she handles things on her end, and I handle things on mine. But apparently she's decided that's not enough anymore. And that's when she drops the real kicker. She says, if you really cared about the kids' well-being, you'd want to support the whole family, not just your kids. She went on about how I needed to show good faith by stepping up for the other kids as well. I almost laughed out loud because it just felt so absurd. I mean, since when does supporting your kids mean taking on everyone else's kids too? At that point, I felt myself starting to lose it a bit. I told her, look, I do care about my kids' well-being. That's why I'm willing to do these things for them. But I'm not going to let you guilt-trip me into paying for kids that aren't mine. She didn't like that one bit. She gets defensive, saying that I'm being selfish and not thinking about how this will affect the kids in the long run. I fired back. How is it selfish to just take care of my own kids? You made the choice to add these other kids into your household. That's not on me. Then her husband shows up. Yeah, I don't know if she planned for him to just happen to stop by, but suddenly he's there, and he's coming over to our table. He barely even acknowledges me and just goes straight to Adabo like he's about to save the day or something. He sits down and basically starts in on me like he's been waiting for this chance. He goes, "I don't think you're being fair. We're supposed to be creating a family here, and your actions are putting up barriers." I just stared at him for a second, wondering if he really thought I was going to buy into this whole "we're all family" thing when it came to my wallet. So, I told him straight up, "I'm here to support my twins. That's what I signed up for. You can't just expect me to pretend all these other kids are mine financially." And then he hits me with, "Well, if the kids start hating each other, that's on you. You're the one creating division." That set me off. I told him, "You're the one pushing for me to play dad to kids that aren't mine. I'm not the one making this complicated. I just want to do right by my twins, and that's it." I didn't care if he thought I was being cold. At this point, I felt like they were both trying to gang up on me and make me feel like the bad guy just for having boundaries. Things got a little heated after that. Adabo starts saying that if the kids grow up resenting each other, it'll all be because I didn't care enough to support their family vision. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her, "If that's the case, maybe you and your husband need to figure out a way to handle it, but don't put it all on me." By this point, people in the diner were definitely giving us a few looks, and honestly, I didn't care. I was so fed up with being made to feel like the villain in this story. I just wanted to do something nice for my kids, and somehow, it had spiraled into this giant mess about what I owed to her household. It was like they expected me to just blindly fund whatever came up for every kid under their roof because they decided to blend their families. I finally stood up and said, "Look, I've said my piece. My focus is on my twins, and that's not changing. If you want everything to be equal, then maybe you need to take a look at what you guys are doing, not what I'm doing. But I'm done being the bad guy here." And with that, I walked out, feeling a mix of frustration and relief. It was clear to me that no matter what I said, they weren't going to get it. As I left, I could still feel their eyes on me, like they were just waiting for me to give in and agree to their terms. But at this point, I was done. I'd set my boundaries, and I wasn't about to let them push me into something I didn't sign up for. It's one thing to want your kids to feel like part of a family, but it's another to expect someone else to foot the bill for it. Alright, so after that disaster of a conversation at the diner, I thought things might finally cool down. I figured Adabo and her husband would get the point. Maybe just drop it and move on. But I should have known better. The whole thing didn't just disappear, it actually got worse. A few days later, I started getting these long-winded texts from her family members. It started with her sister, who's usually pretty chill and has stayed out of our issues in the past. But suddenly, she's texting me, talking about how it's so important for the kids to feel like they're in one big family. She's saying stuff like, "If you really cared about your kids' happiness, you'd be willing to do this for them." It felt like she was implying I was doing something wrong just because I didn't want to pay for her sister's stepkids. I tried ignoring it, thinking maybe she'd just let it go, but the messages kept coming, and they weren't getting any nicer. It went from subtle suggestions to flat-out accusations. Suddenly, I'm selfish, stingy, not thinking about the bigger picture. I swear, they made it sound like I was tearing some big, happy family apart, just because I didn't want to fund a trip for a couple of kids who aren't mine. Her family was acting like I'd declared war on them or something, all because I set a boundary. And then it got worse. Adabo's mom decides to call me. Now, I hadn't spoken to her in a while, and I was pretty surprised to see her name pop up. I figured she'd want to talk about the twins, maybe have a calm discussion. But nope, that call was something else entirely. She launched straight into this whole speech about how things should be. She told me, "If you just pay for all the kids, this wouldn't be an issue. You need to think about how much better it would be if you were more involved with all the children." I felt my patience slipping pretty quickly. I said, "With all due respect, those kids are not my responsibility. I'm doing right by my own kids, and that's what I signed up for." But she kept going, saying things like, "A good man steps up and takes care of the whole family, not just his own." I was floored. I tried to explain to her that while I wanted the best for my twins, it didn't mean I had to financially support every kid her daughter brought into the household. I told her, "Look, I'm not going to feel bad for taking care of my own kids and setting boundaries." But it's like she wasn't even listening. The whole conversation just spiraled from there. She kept repeating herself, talking about how it's my duty as a father, and that the kids are the ones who will suffer. And yeah, she tried to play the guilt card hard. By the end of the call, I was done. I told her, we clearly aren't going to agree on this, and I politely ended the conversation. But the pressure didn't stop. Over the next week or so, it felt like they were rallying the whole family against me. Adabo's brother even left a comment on one of my social media posts about being a dad that was just dripping with passive aggression. He wrote, "Real dads support their families, no matter what." It was obvious he wasn't talking about just my kids. I didn't even respond, I just deleted the comment and moved on. But I won't lie, it annoyed me. I mean, here I am, doing my best for my twins, and somehow that makes me a bad guy in their eyes. One day, I dropped the kids off at Adabo's, and as I was heading back to my car, her husband catches up to me. He doesn't say hi, doesn't do the polite small talk thing, he just jumps right in with, "You know you're hurting the kids with this." I was honestly taken aback. I thought we'd already hashed this out. But clearly he wasn't done. He starts talking about how my decision not to pay for all the kids is driving a wedge between the siblings, and how I need to be more considerate of the family dynamic. I told him, look, I'm not hurting anyone. I'm taking care of my kids. They're not the ones struggling here. But he wouldn't drop it. He went on and on about how everyone in the family thinks I'm being unfair, and how it's only a matter of time before the kids pick up on it and start resenting each other. It felt like he was trying to lay the whole weight of the family's happiness on my shoulders, and I wasn't having it. I told him, "Your family's opinion doesn't change my responsibilities. I'm not their dad. I'm here for my kids, and that's not going to change." And honestly, at that point, I wasn't sure what else to say. It was like no matter what I did, they were going to see me as the villain in their little family story. That night, I was just sitting there, trying to figure out how it had come to this. All I wanted was to take care of my kids, to give them good experiences, and here I was, being painted as some cold-hearted guy who didn't care about family unity. It's like they just couldn't see the line between what's fair and what's not. I ended up venting to a couple of close friends about it. They couldn't believe the pressure Adabo's family was putting on me. One of my friends even joked that if they were so worried about the kids missing out, they could all pitch in and fund the trip themselves. It made me laugh, but at the same time, it was frustrating because it really felt like her whole family had decided that I was obligated to be this all-in parent to a bunch of kids who weren't mine. And for what? Just so I could keep the peace with people who clearly weren't respecting my boundaries. The whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth. I was getting texts and calls from random family members, all pushing the same line, and I was so over it. It felt like they'd built up this idea that I owed them something, and they weren't going to drop it until I caved. By the end of that week, I realized that trying to reason with them was pointless. They weren't looking for an explanation, they were looking for me to fall in line. I told myself I wasn't going to let them wear me down. My kids are my responsibility, and I wasn't going to let this whole extended family guilt trip change that. It's crazy to think that all this started from me just trying to pay for my kids' school trip, but now it's turned into this battle over who's doing enough for the whole family. They may not like it, but I know where I stand. After that week of non-stop messages, friendly advice, and guilt-tripping from Adabo's family, I decided I needed to make a final call on where my boundaries were and stick to them, no exceptions. Because at that point, I was done. It was clear to me that no matter how much I explained myself, they weren't going to get it. They were all laser-focused on this one big happy family idea, and apparently, I was the guy standing in the way by refusing to pay up for every single kid they added to their home. So first things first, I talked to my twins about the upcoming trip. I wanted to make sure they were still excited and didn't feel awkward about it because, after all the drama, I didn't want them to feel guilty or responsible for any of it. I kept it simple and just said, "Hey, I'm really looking forward to this trip for you guys, and I want you to know that this is something special for just the two of you." I didn't go into all the messy details, obviously, but I wanted them to know that it was okay for them to enjoy something just for themselves. Both of them seemed relieved. They definitely picked up on some tension, kids always do, but they seemed happy and were genuinely excited to go on the trip. I could tell they didn't feel bad about it, and that was a huge weight off my shoulders. I needed them to know that they deserved nice experiences without feeling responsible for anyone else. With that settled, I knew I had to set clear boundaries with Adabo and her family. Not just the vague "I'm paying for my kids" only kind of boundary, but a real line they'd understand couldn't be crossed. So, I gave her a call. I kept it calm and straightforward because I didn't want this turning into yet another hour-long argument. I basically said, look, my role as a parent is to support my twins. I'm here for them, and I'm doing what I can to give them good experiences. But that doesn't extend to other children who aren't mine. I respect your choices and your family, but my financial responsibility ends with my twins. Of course, Adabo wasn't thrilled. She immediately started in on how the other kids would feel, and how it's not fair for siblings to have different experiences. I let her talk, but when she started going down that guilt-tripping path again, I stopped her. I told her, I understand how you feel, but this is my final decision. I'm not going to be paying for any extra expenses outside of our twins. I told her if she wanted to work something out for her household, that was up to her, but she needed to stop putting that pressure on me. There was silence for a few moments, and I could tell she was fuming, but I wasn't about to budge. I could almost feel her gearing up to try one last pitch. But she must have realized it wasn't going anywhere. She ended up saying something like, "Fine, I guess you've made your choice," in a tone that was meant to make me feel bad, but I didn't. Honestly, by that point, I felt more relief than anything else. I was done explaining myself. After that, things got quieter. No more random messages from her family members, no more passive-aggressive comments, just silence. And yeah, it was a bit awkward, but it felt good to finally have some peace. I think they finally realized I wasn't going to bend to their demands, and they just had to deal with it. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I made sure to spend some extra time with the twins, doing regular things just to keep everything feeling normal. We'd grab a bite, go to the park, watch movies, all that usual stuff. I wanted them to feel secure and happy, and not caught up in whatever issues the adults around them were having. And honestly, it was refreshing to just focus on them without any of the extra drama. Then, finally, the day of the trip came. I dropped them off at school that morning, and they were all smiles, ready to go. It was great seeing them so excited after everything that had happened. As they ran off to join their friends, I felt this real sense of satisfaction, like, yeah, this is what it's about. It's not about making everyone happy, or bending over backward for people who don't appreciate it. It's about giving my kids the best I can, and teaching them that it's okay to set boundaries. But here's the kicker, and I know I said I wouldn't use that word, but bear with me. The day after the trip, I got a call from Adabo. I was expecting some snarky comment or a passive-aggressive dig, but instead, she just asked if the kids had fun. I told her they did, and I kept it short because I didn't want to dive back into any old arguments. But then she surprised me. She actually thanked me for sticking to what I believed was right. She said, "I didn't agree with you, but I respect that you stood up for yourself and your kids." I guess maybe I needed to hear that. I was honestly shocked. I didn't expect her to come around, but there it was. It wasn't an apology, but it felt like a bit of an acknowledgement that maybe I wasn't the villain they'd all made me out to be. Since then, things have been a lot more peaceful. I don't hear anything from her family, and it's like we've reached this new level of understanding. We might not agree on everything, but we've both accepted our roles in the kids' lives. And honestly, I think it's made me a better dad, because now I'm not constantly second-guessing every decision, wondering how it's going to affect her household. I'm just focusing on what's best for my twins. In the end, this whole situation taught me something important. Sometimes setting boundaries isn't just about saying no to other people. It's about saying yes to your own peace of mind. I've learned that it's okay to prioritize my own family and not feel guilty about it. And if others don't get it, that's on them, not me. So yeah, things are in a good place now. The twins are happy, I'm happy, and it feels like we're finally moving forward without all the extra baggage. I've made it clear where I stand, and I think everyone, even Adabo and her husband, have come to respect that. It's not perfect, and I'm sure there will be bumps down the road, but at least now I know I can stand my ground and make decisions that are best for my family without getting lost in everyone else's expectations. Update. A few weeks after things had finally settled down, I thought maybe I'd heard the last of the demands. But then Adabo hits me up with something new. She starts talking about the twins' living situation at her place, and how they don't have the same comforts they have with me. At first, I'm thinking she's just venting, until she starts hinting that I should do something about it. Turns out she wants me to buy a house. Not for me, but for them. She's saying that it's not fair for the kids to go back and forth between two totally different standards of living, and that it could hurt their self-esteem if they feel like they're lacking at her place. I'm sitting there, trying to process if she's serious, but she's dead serious. She actually expects me to buy a second house for the kids to stay in when they're with her, so she can live in it too. All on my dime. I try to keep calm, but I just have to ask, how does that make any sense? You already have a home. She goes off about how their house is too small for a family her size, and how it's affecting the kids' mental well-being. She's talking about equal standards, like I'm supposed to make up for every choice she's made since we split up. When I tell her that's not going to happen, she pulls out every guilt trip in the book. She says, "Don't you want the kids to feel just as comfortable at my place as they do with you? And how is it fair that I'm not willing to provide for their full living experience?" She's acting like I'm some cold-hearted jerk because I don't want to buy her family a new house. At this point, I'm done. I tell her, "Look, the twins have everything they need at your place. If you think they need a bigger house, that's something you and your husband can handle. I'm not responsible for upgrading your home." She's quiet for a second, then she snaps back saying, "Well, if the kids end up feeling like they have a real home only with you, that'll be on you." I just shake my head, and that's the end of the conversation. I'm not sure how she thought this was a reasonable request. I want the best for my kids, but that doesn't mean I'm buying her a whole new lifestyle. I guess there's no limit to what she'll ask for. But at least I'm clear now. I'm drawing the line, and I'm not budging.